This is the average internet user. Now, I know what thoughts might be running through your head right now. Oh no, is this our generation's
Those
future?
parents ought to be
Remember when
ashamed
we
of
used to play
themselves.
outside?
I can profit off that.
Wait, what?
I can profit off that.
Please don't. Good evening, I'm Bagu Buns, and this is Zenless Zone Zero, commonly abbreviated as ZZZ, and not because the game puts you to sleep. I'm only half joking, of course. If you know anything about the kinds of games that the company mihoyo makes, like Genshin Impact or Honkai Star Rail, then you'll probably know whether this is a game for you or not. Personally, I always felt like their games were style over substance, often with tedious gameplay loops and a gacha system that actually makes me want to fly over to Vegas and gamble my YouTube earnings away, cause at least I have a chance to hit the jackpot in a casino. But to their credit, mihoyo is nearly unparalleled when it comes to their fantastic presentation, impressive size and scope, and character design so good that at least half of whatever the designers touched have subreddits that are in the 98th percentile of all subreddits. I wish I was as dedicated to anything as these 100,000 or so people are to Hutao. But whether you think the mihoyo formula works or not is besides the point. I don't actually care if you think Genshin Impact or Zenless Zone Zero are good games. More power to you. I just hope no other game studio is taking notes from Zenless Zone Zero in particular, because it doesn't feel like a real game. Let's back up for a moment first, because I can imagine that this isn't making a lot of sense for people. Clearly, some of the best talent in the entire industry went into making the game that you see today. What exactly makes Endless Edgy Edible so different from mihoyo's other projects? Does mihoyo even have the star power to inspire any sorts of change? Bagubuns, do you even like video game? Well, it's kind of complicated. mihoyo's games aren't exactly known for their innovation. They're just known for following trends really well. Genshin Impact took a lot of influence from Breath of the Wild. Zenless Zone Zero has elements of Street Fighter, Devil May Cry, and of course Persona in it. However, it's the fact that they dare to go above and beyond these trends that make them so revered in the eyes of the public. Even past its peak popularity, Zenless Zone Zero has around 500,000 concurrent players. This is a bad day for them. What in the actual deuces? A lot of it can be chalked up to the fact that it's a live service and mobile game. The mobile gaming market does work a little bit differently than the PC or console gaming market, especially when you consider that Triple Z is a free-to-play title. However, considering that Zenless Zone Zero is also available on PS5 and PC, and given mihoyo's track record of shattering the boundary of what a mobile game can even be, I'd say that it deserves to be taken seriously. In the 2024 Game Awards, Zenless Zone Zero was even nominated for the Player's Voice Award, which, in very oversimplified terms, is the Game of the Year award but without the gaming journalist bias. Even though it didn't win, it beat out some absolute titans in the industry. Simply calling it influential is an understatement. If I piss off the wrong people, we might set off Gooner 911. This is a real PC Gamer article. And you know what? They kind of had a point. The reason why I wish Zenless Zone Zero doesn't have the influence it does is because I believe that Zenless Zone Zero is brain rot. How dare I? Yes, I know that basically anything can be called brain rot nowadays. Honestly, TikTokified is probably a better descriptor for whatever's going on with alliteration after all. So for the sake of this video, let's just define the TikTokification of something as an entity designed to cater to the low attention span population. Now, I am aware that TikTok is always in limbo about being banned in the United States, but regardless of whether it is or isn't, TikTok had an irreversible effect on the modern internet culture. I refuse to call it the YouTube shortsification or Instagram reelification, so TikTokification it is. There are three elements that I feel like qualify something as TikTokified. Element 1. Being attention grabbing. Almost too much. It's no secret that short-form content has reduced our attention spans. Therefore, getting noticed on these platforms require you to grab somebody within the first few frames and keep their attention the entire time. This can be achieved through quick cuts and editing, or giving off an artificially enthusiastic vibe. Anything that will milk your poor neurons of that sweet, sweet dopamine. Element 2. Being a mess of ideas. A lot of brain rot content capitalizes on the fact that randomness is funny or interesting. And it kind of is. You know how many AI Sonic Adventure memes I see on my For You page? This type of content can absolutely be entertaining, but a lot of it is usually devoid of meaning or cohesion. Element 3. Being hypersexualized. Short form content is great for spreading ideas. It's also great for spreading those cheeks. Gooners have always been around, but I feel like TikTok made it 500 times easier to encounter sexually suggestive content by complete accident. Whether it's the OnlyFans girls advertising their platform or the community of people far too comfortable with sharing their kinks where millions can see it, the internet is a natural disaster of sexual energy. Like a Gooner Johnstown flood. Ugh, it's so gross. And yes, boiling the entirety of short-form content into these 3 parts is pretty reductive, since there are plenty of videos that educate you, inspire you, and showcase some incredible hidden talent. However, you typically hear the term TikTokification thrown around in relation to how music nowadays is over before you even hit the play button, or how social media platforms have tried to leech off the success of whatever this is supposed to be. The TikTok effect, while not inherently terrible, has a negative connotation because it feels like it cheapens whatever it touches. And I'm not only talking about the observable qualities, but also the more artistic qualities. It's bearable to a certain degree, but sometimes it overstays its welcome. Oftentimes a TikTokification occurs because the brand feels a need to keep up with trends and do whatever they think modern audiences like. In marketing terms, this is known as positioning, which attempts to compare the brand to its competitors based on what they think consumers want. Oftentimes when brands TikTokify, it's seen as a cringy move, possibly because they don't understand their own product or their audience. But mihoyo understood that the brain-rotted TikTok audience and their tribalized group of gacha gamers was a perfect alignment. So that's why the positioning of Zenless Zone Zero kind of worked. Never before have I seen the influence and vibe of TikTok permeate so many elements of a video game. I'm not just talking about the brain rot culture surrounding the game, which even Genshin and Star Rail had, but I'm going to analyze the promotion, the way it tells its story, even the way the gameplay is structured. In isolation, none of what mihoyo is doing seems out of the ordinary, but when everything is put into context, it's kind of hard to ignore. While it may be a perfect fit for those that fit in mihoyo's target segment, it kind of isolates everybody else. So let's explore Zenless Zone Zero, the first brain-rot-coded AAA video game. If your attention span is as eroded as mine is, then subscribe to the channel. Hopefully you're not as cooked as you think you are. I don't think my angle on Zenless Zone Zero being a brain rot game really makes sense without first taking a look at their promotion. Marketing changes all the time, and it's only natural that social media would eventually be a massive factor in a company's promotional strategy. This is the kind of stuff that can wildly shape the tone and perception of your game before it comes out. However, it's honestly kind of rare to see video game companies, especially the size of hoyoverse, making content for a TikTok generation. It's not to say that game companies don't utilize short-form content, because there is a wealth of young people that spends lots of hours on these platforms. So who would pass up that opportunity? However, when you think of social media promotion in the short-form age, you typically think of brands trying to go viral by adapting trends. Many of these may be restaurants, independent artists, even churches. Very rarely do you see prominent video game studios doing this, and it goes deeper than just, yeah, everybody knows Nintendo, so they don't need to push as hard. When you're thinking about the right types of products to push through social media, you have to think about consumer involvement. Involvement refers to how much thought you put into buying something. If you see a promo for a tasty snack, you could go, damn, I'm kinda hungry right now, and that looks mighty scrumptious. Might as well treat myself, and buy it from your local store or something. That is considered a low involvement purchase. The snack probably didn't financially devastate you, hopefully. And if it tasted kind of funky, you could probably wipe the experience from your memory. Low involvement products like food or music are easily promotable through social media, but they really have to fight for attention among the sea of similar products, so you don't go munching on another snack, you two-timing strumpet! Now imagine that scenario again, but instead of an ad for a tasty little treat, it's an ad for a frickin' Tesla Cybertruck. You can't just simply buy something like that and then forget about it if it breaks down in cold weather, looks like baby's first blender project, or is a potential threat to the driver's life. Nah, that's an 80 grand investment at the very least, and also a high involvement purchase. It's much more than the price that determines how high the consumer involvement is. It can be affected by variables like longevity, consumer needs, not looking like an N64 era Boulder asset, but it really does vary across products, people, and usage situations. While most video games aren't as pricey as an automotive vehicle, they could still be considered a relatively high involvement purchase based on how much time you're expecting to spend in it or the experience you hope to get out of it. Gacha games are in a strange place when it comes to how high or low involvement they are because, yeah, they're free, but the goal is to make the game as addictive as possible to gain your loyalty. Once they have that, they try to hook you in with microtransactions. Blink and you're 70 grand in the hole and your soul now belongs to your gacha overlords. So yeah, Zenless Zone Zero is a high involvement product, but its promotion doesn't treat it like such. Let me just be clear in saying that this method of promotion isn't necessarily bad. In fact, using social media to incentivize players is great as a supplemental marketing tactic. The issue is that almost every single bit of promotional material is shot like a thirst trap or a CapCut edit, and this is 100% on purpose. How do I put this? A lot of mihoyo fans are weird as hell, bro. The greatly increased exposure to sexual content thanks to brain rot culture is a big part of the identity of Zenless Zone Zero. A lot of the content on their social media pages revolve around the game's characters. I feel like Zenless Zone Zero is especially easy to milk a lot of brain rot content out of because the characters in the game are very social media compatible in one way or another. I wonder why this part is the most replayed. Yeah, that checks out. However, once again, the problem with this style of promotion being your primary method of promo is that it cheapens the image of your product, especially to those outside the fandom. I get that the game setting is more urban and they actually have phones and, not? But TikTok's marketing only works because it's a novelty, not a way to appeal to consumer needs or communicate information to the consumer, which higher involvement products like video games in particular really need. Given the success of the game and accounting for the brand loyalty gained from Genshin Impact, Honkai Impact 3rd, and Honkai Star Rail, that means that the appeal of Zenless Zone Zero was probably pretty shallow, which is not something you really want when your game probably costs millions of dollars and lots of years to develop. But you might wonder what I mean by cheapening the image of the game, especially if you look at their official page, since despite the whimsical tone, a lot of the videos are still professionally composed. Well, this isn't taking into account the videos that they have since removed from their official account, which are on this page right here. Zenless Zone Zero have been hiding hundreds of videos from their page with a channel called Zenless Zone Zero Admin. Whereas the official channel has what you might expect from a video game company's social media, this account suggests a different story. A lot of this is stuff that I sort of pieced together because there's very little public confirmation regarding the situation, but this was supposedly the old social media administrator, and all of this content was once on the official page. Here you could see the stark contrast between what is on the admin's account versus the official account. Yup, that's about what I expected. Some people believe that the admin was either fired or more likely was asked to separate the brain rot, but the existence of this treasure trove of whatever this is suggests to me that the game was made with this kind of stuff in mind. After all, many of these brain rot promos existed before the official game was released, and they made the game kind of feel like a scam. It seems like the developer realized this midway through their promotional campaign, that blasting vulgar audio does give this game a lot of attention, but it doesn't really communicate the game that well. I guess the intention of separating the brain rot content from the character trailers and official promos made it seem like a fan account or something, so these things wouldn't affect the perceived quality of the game. Don't worry, the team could just make their own professional brain rot instead. I don't think I've ever seen animation simultaneously as good and as bad as in Zenless Zone Zero. The topic of animation in this game is super divisive, with some people thinking it's the greatest thing ever, and others thinking that it's too much. And it's kind of both. There are areas where the game's animation style really shines. These big, climactic fight sequences are absolutely orgasmic.
Macaroni with the chicken strips.
I mean, this is some of the finest that this 3D anime styled animation has to offer. Studios have been trying to do this stuff for years. Guts is modeled like he lost every battle he ever fought. Stop cooking, you're gonna send Uncle Roger into a coma. Can't fix bad CG with a Snapchat filter. So yeah, miHoYo is definitely operating at a level only select studios truly can. I don't know if I even can critique this element of the animation because the animators would just animate me out of existence. However, animation also dictates how the game feels to play outside of the cutscene bits. And it's freaking incredible as well, at least in combat. The attack poses are nicely exaggerated and timed to give every bit of movement the necessary weight. Switching characters is no longer just whoa, but it's like a tag team. Sure, even on challenge mode you can play the game with one hand, but you know your character animation is good when you can just shadow box for days.
Sweetie, you've been in your room for months. Everybody's worried about you.
Shut up, Mom, I'm fighting my inner demons right now. The animation is also really good at conveying characters. Even if you take away the voice acting, you can sort of tell what the character's vibe is going to be like by how expressive they are. I could tell the animators are having so much fun doing stuff like this, and good for them. I enjoy seeing that. Sometimes. The parts where the animation starts to TikTokify is when the pace is supposed to slow down and the animators probably shouldn't make the characters striking a different pose every 1.5 seconds, yet they do anyway. This is when Senseless Sock 6's animation becomes less like a breath of fresh air and more like a breath of fresh nitrous. This is where lies a majority of Zenless Zone Zero's critiques regarding their animation. While yes, they still are technically very impressive in isolation, they are beyond overanimated. Characters all dart around like they dry scooped caffeine. Don't do that, by the way, it'll probably put you in the ER. The problem isn't that they're cartoony. That would be fine, and it would certainly fit the aesthetic the game strives for. The issue is that it isn't that cohesive. If you have 3 characters moving in different ways in the foreground of the scene, when you're trying to draw attention to the subjects in the background of the scene who are also moving, your eyes don't really know where to go. This is one out of many examples where I feel like the hyperactive nature of Zenless Zone Zero cheapens the game feel. Everything else in this scene would work if these 3 goobers just stood still for even like a few seconds, but since they're like fidgeting, the intention is lost and the effect isn't as, well, effective. The animation is like if a talented writer threw in the most complicated flowery words that they knew into a book, or if a jazz musician condensed every single piece of music theory they know into an album. Woo! Man, music was so much better in the 60s, modern music sucks! The emphasis on non-stop movement also reduces the impact of the climactic scenes, since these scenes no longer stand out as much within the context of the game. If every scene tries to wrestle for your attention like a Cocomelon video, none of them will stick out when it really matters. It's already hard to deal with stuff like retention editing in 1 to 3 minute reels, but stretch that out over the course of an entire game and it just bothers me. I don't enjoy feeling like this ADHD animation is soulless because they're clearly polished and definitely cost a lot, both in terms of animation budget and storage. However, I feel like this constant attention-seeking Sakuga only exists because the animator saw something like this and went like, yeah, that's a mood right there. While I was working on this video, New Frame Plus made a video analyzing the animation of Zenless Zone Zero, and he is much more intricate and knowledgeable about this field than I am. You should watch it. That is a threat. Again, these segments don't necessarily fall apart, and they're not terrible, and there are scenes that I genuinely like a lot, but once again, I can't help feeling like they're catering to a brain-rotted audience. miHoYo is a company that understands what their audience likes from them, and I doubt they would make such an investment without expecting it to pay off at least a little bit. After all, this aspect of the characters is the side of them that gets pushed to general audiences in promotions and stuff like that. But if they were a little more intentional with not injecting their characters with crack, these characters would feel more vivid. At the end of the day, it's completely subjective, but I'd still argue that for how much these animations must have cost, they added a lot less than they should have, especially when you look at the rest of the game. Now, I don't want to dig too deeply into the gameplay since this isn't a game review channel, but it's really worth taking a look at how this game is actually structured. The promotion and animation set a certain expectation about how the game would actually turn out. Both had their good and bad qualities, so the quality of the final result was dubious to say the least. The release of the gameplay trailer a couple weeks before the game's launch further complicated perceptions about this game. There were 2 short combat segments separated by an exploration of the hub world, and the game felt really incongruent with what we got from the trailers. It was slower paced. The characters took their ADHD medication. There were plenty of things to do in this hub world, but honestly, it's a bit deceptive. At least in my experience, the majority of this game is not spent this way. Structurally, Zenless Zone Zero is a mess. It's not a particularly massive game. The combat areas are all small, linear, and self-contained, and the hub world, New Eridu, isn't particularly expansive either. The issue is that the game is not particularly cohesive in its approach to gameplay. If you were to follow the events of the main story, you'd be dragged all over the place. It isn't simply just experiencing one level after another, but rather you're being dragged all over the map to do different things all the time. This part of the story requires you to battle. Okay, now go to the coffee shop. Now go to the arcade and play Snake. Now battle again. Interrupt that with a cutscene. Fight the boss. Take a picture of a cat. And so on and so forth. All the objectives are scattered around in a very artificial way to get you to interact with everything. It seems like the game doesn't want you to just be doing the same things over and over again, and spices things up with whatever the hell this is. However, that means that nothing that Zenless Zone Zero does is particularly fleshed out or well done. Rather, it does everything to a fine enough extent, but scatters so much of it around to make it seem like the game has content. And yeah, you can go out of order a little bit and do things for yourself, how scandalous! But leveling up that way isn't as efficient as going to wherever the game tells you to go. You're either going to sacrifice the better reward to play the segments that'll get repetitive anyways, or follow the game on this back and forth, going location to do a petty quest. Either way, the end result is something fighting for your attention every 5 minutes. It feels like the gameplay serves as something to interrupt the story rather than aid it. When the cutscenes aren't luring you in with their overwhelming scenes, then the gameplay is snowballing into something new. To be fair, this is how mihoyo questlines usually work, but just turned to 11 to maximize that dopamine rush that you get. None of it is egregious, but since everything you do feels like a side quest, I'd say that this game is not particularly cohesive or memorable. They say variety is the spice of life. Oh my god! I'm sure it is. In the end, I don't really care if you think that the cutscenes are peak fiction, the game is actually cool, or the brain rot is funny. There are plenty of people who really enjoy the game, but also a lot more that felt put off by the way the game positioned itself. These are my personal experiences with the game, and I am sort of defining it by my own metrics. However, you can't deny that this game came out of a mold that is the collective internet, and it is designed to appeal to that demographic. The main appeal of the game is collecting characters and appreciating the art style. It's just hard to do all that when the game is so style over substance, so hyperactive and such an incoherent mess. While, again, I know the people that worked on this game are wickedly talented, the end product feels like giving content creators a massive budget to piece together whatever ideas they thought would be cool in a video game. Honestly, that was probably more of an insult to content creators than it was to Zenless Zone Zero. The game is getting a little better as time goes on, and there are a lot of things to like about it, but it still seems very proud of its brain rot gooner game status. When you see elements from gacha games making their way into other AAA titles, what happens when the king of gacha games sets a bad precedent? Like, what'll happen to Mario? No! The gooners! They already got to my boy! I think this is a sign for me to step off the internet and, I don't know, survive in the woods for a while. Thanks for watching. Good night, everybody.